So there I was, watching what had to be the most anticlimactic first contact in galactic history. The alien ship landed with all the grace of a drunk elephant doing ballet, kicking up a dust cloud that would make a sandstorm jealous, and out stepped Thor the Magnificent. Yes, that's actually what he called himself, looking like someone had crossed a 7-foot praying mantis with a particularly cranky lizard and given it a superiority complex. Now, you'd think that meeting your first alien would be this profound, life-changing moment. Maybe some deep philosophical exchange about the nature of existence across the cosmos. Instead, the first human Thor encountered was 8-year-old Tommy Martinez, who was sitting on a park bench eating a peanut butter sandwich and scratching behind the ears of his tabby cat, Mr. Whiskers. Tommy looked up at this towering alien creature, all chitinous plates and glowing red eyes, and said, "Cool costume, mister. Is it Halloween already?" Thor's mandibles clicked together in what I can only assume was alien confusion. "Costume? Costume?" His voice sounded like gravel being processed through a blender. "I am Thor of the Kethraki Dominion, apex predator of 17 star systems and—" "That's a really long name," Tommy interrupted, taking another bite of his sandwich. "Can I just call you Zek?" The alien's eye stalks twitched. Oh yes, eye stalks. Because apparently evolution thought that wasn't terrifying enough and decided to make them mobile. "You dare to abbreviate my—" "Mr. Whiskers thinks you're kind of weird looking," Tommy continued conversationally. The cat in question had opened one lazy green eye to assess the alien, found him apparently uninteresting, and promptly went back to sleep. This was where things started going sideways. Thor looked down at Mr. Whiskers, all 12 pounds of orange fluff currently sprawled across Tommy's lap like he owned the place, and actually laughed. It sounded like a garbage disposal trying to process a wind chime. This is what your species considers a companion." Thor leaned closer, his massive head hovering over the sleepy cat. "We have parasites on my homeworld more fearsome than this pathetic creature." Tommy's face scrunched up, the way kids' faces do when adults say something particularly stupid. "Mr. Whiskers isn't pathetic, he's just tired because he was up all night hunting." "Hunting?" Thor's laugh got even more grating. "What does this oversized furball hunt? Dust particles? Perhaps it stalks the mighty houseplant?" "Mice, mostly, sometimes birds. Last week he got a rat that was almost as big as he is." Tommy said this with the casual pride of a kid whose pet had just won a blue ribbon. But Thor was having none of it. "Your species has clearly grown soft, young human. On my world, we are apex predators from the moment we hatch. We do not coddle small, weak creatures for emotional comfort." He gestured dismissively at Mr. Whiskers. "We devour them." Tommy considered this seriously, the way kids do when they're processing information that doesn't quite fit their world view. "So you eat cats?" "If we encountered such pitiful creatures, yes, though they would hardly provide enough sustenance to justify the effort." That's when Tommy did something that should have been the first warning sign for our overconfident alien visitor. The kid smiled. Not the innocent, sweet smile of childhood, but that knowing little smirk that meant someone was about to learn something they really didn't want to know. "You should probably apologize to Mr. Whiskers," Tommy said mildly. "He doesn't like being called names." Thor looked down at the cat, who was still apparently fast asleep, and his mandibles clicked in what I can only describe as alien amusement. "Oh, I'm sure he'll devastate me with his terrible wrath." Tommy just shrugged and went back to his sandwich. "I tried to warn you." And somewhere in that exchange, watching this 7-foot killing machine mock a house cat while an 8-year-old tried to give him friendly advice, I started to get the feeling that Thor the Magnificent was about to discover something very important about Earth. Something about the kind of planet where the apex predators let themselves be kept as pets. 20 minutes later, we were all standing in what the mayor had optimistically called the First Contact Welcome Pavilion, which was really just a hastily erected tent with some folding chairs and a banner that read, "Welcome to Earth, please don't vaporize us." Subtle. Captain Helena Rodriguez, Earth's freshly appointed alien ambassador, was doing her best to salvage what was rapidly becoming the galaxy's most awkward diplomatic meeting. She had that look people get when they're trying to smile professionally, while mentally calculating how badly things could go wrong. "Thor the Magnificent," she began, reading from her carefully prepared notes. "On behalf of the United Nations, we welcome you to—" "Your planet reeks," Thor interrupted, his eye stalks swiveling around the pavilion like periscopes, scanning for threats. "The atmospheric composition is adequate for basic survival, I suppose, but the scent of your domesticated creatures is overwhelming." Captain Rodriguez's smile got a little tighter. Yes, well, we do have a diverse ecosystem here on Earth. Perhaps we could discuss... Diverse? Zekthor's mandibles clicked in what was becoming a familiar expression of disdain. From what I have observed, your species has taken potentially viable predators and reduced them to dependent, weakened shadows of their evolutionary potential. He gestured toward the corner of the tent, where Tommy sat cross-legged, still holding Mr. Whiskers' creature there, for instance. In its natural state, it might have possessed some basic hunting instincts. Instead, your kind has bred it into a lazy, pampered pet. Tommy looked up from where he was trying to convince Mr. Whiskers to pose for a selfie. He's not lazy, he's just conserving energy. Conserving energy, Zekthor repeated, his voice dripping with alien sarcasm. How? Strategic! Tell me, young human, what great battles is your fearsome companion preparing for? Perhaps an epic confrontation with a particularly aggressive bowl of food? Several of the UN officials chuckled nervously. Captain Rodriguez shot them a look that could have melted steel. Actually, Tommy said, completely unbothered by the alien's tone, he's probably getting ready for tonight. That's when he does his real hunting. Real hunting, Zekthor scoffed. Let me guess, he stalks the mighty dust bunny under your sleeping platform. Well, there's mice in the walls of our apartment building, and sometimes pigeons land on the fire escape. Tommy scratched Mr. Whiskers behind the ears, causing the cat to purr like a small engine. Last month he caught this huge rat that had been eating Mrs. Garcia's tomatoes. She gave him a whole can of tuna as a reward. Zekthor turned to Captain Rodriguez with what I can only describe as pity. This is what your species considers impressive? On my homeworld, hatchlings younger than this human consume prey twice their body weight before their first molting. How fascinating, Captain Rodriguez said through gritted teeth. Perhaps we could focus on establishing formal diplomatic relations. Relations? Zekthor's laugh could have curdled milk. Between the Kethraki Dominion and a species that celebrates their predators catching vermin. We are beings of conquest, of superior evolutionary development. You are keepers of oversized house pets. That's when Mr. Whiskers decided to make his entrance into galactic diplomacy. The cat had apparently grown bored with Tommy's attempts at photography and wandered over to investigate the strange new creature. He sat down right in front of Zekthor's massive clawed feet and began the slow, deliberate washing ritual that cats perform when they want to look completely unconcerned by everything around them. Ah, Zekthor said, looming over the small cat. The fierce hunter approaches. Tell me, creature, do you bring tribute from your latest conquest? Perhaps the severed head of a particularly challenging piece of string? Mr. Whiskers paused in his grooming to look up at the alien. For a moment, they stared at each other. 7 feet of chitinous predator and 12 pounds of orange fluff. Then Mr. Whiskers went back to washing his paw with the kind of dismissive attitude that only cats can truly master. He's ignoring you, Tommy observed helpfully. It lacks the cognitive capacity to recognize a superior life form, Zekthor replied, though his eye stalks were tracking the cat's movements with surprising intensity. Typical of creatures that have been artificially selected for docility rather than survival. Captain Rodriguez cleared her throat. If we could return to the matter of trade agreements. Trade? Zekthor's attention snapped back to the humans. What could your species possibly offer the Dominion? You have neutered your predators and turned them into companions. Your young play with creatures that should be preparing for mortal combat. What great warriors could emerge from such a soft civilization? Tommy looked thoughtful. Mr. Whiskers killed a pigeon last week that was bigger than he was. Does that count? A pigeon. Zekthor's voice went flat. Your apex predator, defeated. A pigeon. It was a really big pigeon, Tommy said defensively. And he didn't even eat it, he just left it on the doormat for Mom to find. She screamed really loud. And right there, watching this alien war machine mock a house cat while an 8-year-old tried to explain the finer points of feline hunting behavior to someone who clearly wasn't listening, I started to wonder if Zekthor had any idea what he was getting himself into. After all, there's probably a reason why humans are the ones keeping apex predators as pets, and not the other way around. By this point, Captain Rodriguez had developed the kind of facial expression usually reserved for people watching a train wreck in slow motion. She made one last valiant attempt at diplomacy. Perhaps, she said carefully, we could demonstrate some of Earth's natural ecosystems. Our wildlife preserves showcase... Wildlife preserves, Zekthor interrupted, his mandibles clicking rapidly. You mean zoos for creatures too weak to survive in their natural state. Actually, I was thinking more of a nature walk, Captain Rodriguez said, her diplomatic smile reaching dangerous levels of forced cheer. The Cascade Forest Preserve is just a few miles from here. Beautiful hiking trails, diverse wildlife, very educational. Tommy perked up from his corner. Ooh, can we go? Mr. Whiskers loves the woods. He gets to hunt real stuff there instead of just apartment mice. Zekthor's eye stalk swiveled toward the boy with predatory focus. Real stuff? Do enlighten me, young human. What fearsome beasts does your domesticated pet stalk in these preserved wilderness areas? Squirrels, mostly. Sometimes chipmunks. Oh, and there's this family of rabbits that live near the creek. Tommy was getting excited now, the way kids do when they get to talk about something they find genuinely interesting. He caught 3 mice in one night last time we went camping. 3 mice, Zekthor repeated slowly. In an entire night. Truly the stuff of legend. It was pretty impressive, Tommy said, missing the sarcasm entirely. Mom said she'd never seen anything move that fast. And that's when Zekthor made what historians will probably record as the single worst decision in interspecies diplomatic relations. I propose a demonstration, he announced, drawing himself up to his full, intimidating height. Let us journey to these woods you speak of. I shall show your species what true predatory excellence looks like. Captain Rodriguez's smile finally cracked. I'm not sure that's... Are you suggesting that a member of the Kethraki Dominion might find your local wildlife challenging? Zekthor's voice carried the kind of dangerous quiet that makes smart people start backing toward the exits. No, of course not, Rodriguez said quickly. It's just that our insurance doesn't really cover alien hunting demonstrations, and... Then it is settled. Zekthor turned to Tommy with what might have been intended as a friendly gesture but came across more like a threat display. Bring your pet, young human. Let it observe how a true apex predator conducts a hunt. Perhaps it will learn something useful. Tommy looked down at Mr. Whiskers, who was now sprawled on his back in a patch of afternoon sunlight, all 4 paws in the air, looking about as apex as a throw pillow. Can he come just to watch? Tommy asked. He gets cranky if he misses his afternoon nap. By all means, Zekthor said magnanimously, though I suspect it will spend the entire excursion sleeping, as seems to be its primary function. Captain Rodriguez was frantically making notes, probably calculating how many international incidents she was about to be responsible for. Perhaps we should establish some ground rules? The only rule, Zekthor declared, is that your species will finally witness what evolution produces when it is not corrupted by artificial domestication. He gestured dismissively at Mr. Whiskers. When predators are allowed to remain predators rather than becoming furniture that occasionally catches vermin. Tommy stood up, cradling the sleepy cat against his chest. Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. Mr. Whiskers doesn't like being made fun of. I shall endeavor to contain my terror, Zekthor replied dryly. The alien turned to Captain Rodriguez with the kind of confidence that would have been impressive if it weren't so completely misplaced. Prepare your documentation equipment, human. By day's end, your people will understand the vast gulf that separates true evolutionary perfection from your domesticated companions. Rodriguez looked like she was developing a stress headache. And if something goes wrong? Wrong. Zekthor's laugh could have stripped paint. What could possibly go wrong? I am an apex predator of the Kethraka Dominion, evolved over millions of years for the singular purpose of hunting and killing. Your pet is a house cat. Tommy shifted Mr. Whiskers to one arm and used his free hand to dig around in his backpack. Should I bring his favorite toy mouse? Sometimes he gets playful when he's been cooped up inside too long. A toy mouse, Zekthor mused. Yes, bring it. Perhaps after observing a real hunt, your pet will understand how inadequate its play hunting truly is. Captain Rodriguez gathered her papers with the resigned efficiency of someone who knew they were about to witness either a diplomatic breakthrough or a complete disaster. I'll make the arrangements for transport to the preserve. As the adults bustled around organizing what was shaping up to be the most unusual field trip in human history, Tommy sat back down and whispered something to Mr. Whiskers. The cat opened one green eye, looked directly at Zekthor, and began purring with what sounded suspiciously like anticipation. What did you tell it? Zekthor asked, though he tried to sound disinterested. Tommy grinned. I told him he was going to get to show off today. And watching that exchange, seeing a 7-foot alien predator preparing to demonstrate his superiority to a house cat, while an 8-year-old looked on with barely contained excitement, I couldn't help but think that someone was definitely going to learn something important in those woods. I was just starting to suspect it wasn't going to be Mr. Whiskers. An hour later, we found ourselves standing at the edge of Cascade Forest Preserve, watching Zekthor prepare for what he clearly considered to be the most one-sided educational demonstration in galactic history. He'd spent the entire car ride explaining Kethraki hunting techniques to anyone who would listen, which basically meant Captain Rodriguez, who was trapped in the driver's seat and couldn't escape. You see, Zekthor was saying as he flexed his razor-sharp claws, the key to successful predation lies in understanding your prey's limitations. He gestured toward the forest with the confidence of someone who'd never met a food chain he couldn't top. Small mammals, birds, the occasional reptile, all operate on predictable behavioral patterns developed over millions of years of evolution. Tommy was sitting on a fallen log, with Mr. Whiskers draped across his lap like a furry scarf. The cat appeared to be fast asleep, though one ear kept twitching at the sound of Zekthor's voice. Mr. Whiskers usually likes to scout first, Tommy offered helpfully. He walks around and sniffs things for a while before he starts hunting. Scouting? Zekthor repeated with barely concealed amusement. How? Methodical. On my homeworld, we simply identify our target and strike. Hesitation is weakness. But what if you miss? The alien's eye stalks fixed on Tommy with the intensity of laser sights. Miss? The Kethraki do not miss, young human. We are evolution perfected for the hunt. Observe. And with that proclamation, Zekthor disappeared into the underbrush with surprising grace for something the size of a small spacecraft. For about 30 seconds, the forest was completely silent, except for the usual background noise of birds and rustling leaves. Then came the sound of something crashing through the undergrowth like a bulldozer with anger management issues, followed by a series of clicks and hisses that I can only assume were alien curse words. "Is he okay?" Tommy asked, looking toward the source of the commotion. Captain Rodriguez was frantically taking notes. "I'm sure he's fine. Probably just adapting to local conditions." More crashing sounds emerged from the forest, accompanied by what sounded like Zekthor having a heated argument with a tree. Then silence. Then more crashing. After about 10 minutes of this, Zekthor emerged from the woods carrying what appeared to be a rather bewildered squirrel in his claws. The squirrel looked like it was having the worst day of its tiny life, but otherwise seemed unharmed. "Behold," Zekthor announced triumphantly. "Swift, silent, and utterly lethal. This creature never knew what stalked it." The squirrel chittered indignantly and tried to bite one of Zekthor's claws, which seemed to offend the alien's sense of dramatic timing. "That's Mr. Nutkin," Tommy said conversationally. "He lives in the big oak tree over there. Mom feeds him peanuts sometimes." Zekthor's mandibles stopped clicking. "You know this creature?" "Well, yeah. He's got that white patch on his tail, see? And he's missing half his left ear from when Mr. Peterson's dog chased him last summer." Tommy squinted at the squirrel. "Hi, Mr. Nutkin. Sorry about the alien." The squirrel chittered again, this time with what sounded suspiciously like recognition. "You have domesticated the local wildlife as well?" Zekthor asked, his voice rising in what might have been panic. "Not domesticated," Captain Rodriguez said quickly. "More like familiar with. Small town, you know. People tend to notice the local animals." Zekthor released the squirrel, which immediately scampered up the nearest tree and began scolding him in angry squirrel language. The alien looked like someone had just explained that his grand conquest had been of a neighborhood pet. "No matter," he said, drawing himself up to his full height again. "That was merely a warm-up. Now you shall witness true predatory excellence." He disappeared back into the woods. This time the crashing was even louder, punctuated by what sounded like Zekthor getting into arguments with multiple trees, several bushes, and possibly a rock or two. "Should we be worried?" Rodriguez whispered. Tommy shrugged. "He seems to be having fun. Mr. Whiskers is enjoying the show." I looked down at the cat, who was still sprawled across Tommy's lap, but now had both eyes open, watching the forest with the kind of focused attention cats usually reserve for laser pointers or particularly interesting pieces of string. "He's awake," I observed. "Yeah, he does that when things get interesting." Tommy scratched behind the cat's ears. "I think he's figuring out what all the noise is about." More crashing from the forest, followed by a triumphant alien roar. Zekthor emerged again, this time carrying what looked like a small rabbit. "Success," he declared. "Swift as lightning, silent as death itself." "That's Benjamin Bunny," Tommy said immediately. "He lives under the bridge by the creek. Mrs. Chen brings him lettuce on Wednesdays." The rabbit in question looked up at Tommy and wiggled its nose in what could generously be called a greeting. Zekthor's eye stalks drooped. "Are you telling me that every creature in this forest is known to your species?" Well, not every creature, Tommy said reasonably. There's probably some bugs we haven't met yet, and the raccoons mostly keep to themselves. That's when Mr. Whiskers stretched, yawned, and hopped down from Tommy's lap with the fluid grace that cats use when they've decided it's time to stop pretending to be harmless house pets. "Oh," Tommy said, brightening up, "I think Mr. Whiskers wants to show you how it's done." And watching this 12-pound ball of orange fluff pad silently into the forest, while a 7-foot alien predator stood there holding a neighborhood rabbit and looking increasingly confused, I started to get the feeling that the real demonstration was about to begin. What happened next will probably go down in xenobiological textbooks as the moment an entire alien species learned to respect Earth's food chain. Mr. Whiskers had been in the forest for maybe 30 seconds when the entire soundscape changed. The birds stopped chirping, the insects went quiet, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. It was like someone had hit the mute button on nature itself. "Why is everything so quiet?" Captain Rodriguez whispered. Tommy just smiled. "Mr. Whiskers is working." Zek Thor, still holding Benjamin Bunny, looked around with growing unease. "Where did your pet go? I can detect no movement, no sound." That's when Mr. Whiskers reappeared at the edge of the clearing, moving with the kind of liquid silence that makes you understand why ancient Egyptians worshipped cats as gods. Except he wasn't the same lazy house cat who'd been napping in Tommy's lap 5 minutes earlier. This was something else entirely. His pupils had dilated to perfect black circles. His ears were swiveled forward like furry radar dishes. Every muscle in his compact body was coiled with predatory focus. And in his mouth? "Is that a mouse?" Rodriguez asked faintly. "That's a vole," Tommy corrected. "They're harder to catch than mice because they're faster." Mr. Whiskers padded over to Tommy, dropped the vole at his feet with the casual efficiency of a professional, and immediately melted back into the forest before anyone could blink. Zek Thor started to ask, but he was interrupted by Mr. Whiskers reappearing with what looked like a small bird. Drop, disappear. Reappear with a chipmunk. Drop, disappear, reappear with something that might have been a shrew. "Okay, that's definitely showing off," Tommy said with obvious pride. "He doesn't usually catch this much stuff this fast." Zek Thor was staring at the growing pile of perfectly dispatched small animals with the expression of someone whose entire worldview was currently being demolished by a house pet. "This is impossible," he managed. "No creature that size could move with such stealth, such precision." Mr. Whiskers reappeared again, this time carrying something that made Captain Rodriguez actually gasp. It was a rat, not a cute little field mouse or a tiny vole, but a full-sized, street-smart, garbage-eating city rat that had probably survived everything urban life could throw at it. Until it met Mr. Whiskers. Holy. Rodriguez caught herself before finishing the sentence in front of Tommy. "That's a big one," Tommy agreed cheerfully. "Mr. Whiskers must really like you, Mr. Alien Guy. He's showing you his best hunting." But Zek Thor wasn't listening anymore. He was watching Mr. Whiskers with the kind of fascinated horror usually reserved for natural disasters or tax audits. The cat had become something that belonged in nature documentaries, narrated by people with British accents, talking about nature's perfect killing machines. "The movement patterns," Zek Thor whispered. "The strike precision. The complete absence of wasted motion or energy." His eye stalks tracked Mr. Whiskers as the cat vanished into the underbrush again. "This creature exhibits apex predator characteristics that rival, no, exceed, our own evolutionary adaptations." "He's just a cat," Tommy said, but he was grinning now. "Just a cat?" Zek Thor's voice cracked slightly. "Just a cat? That creature just demonstrated hunting efficiency that would shame a Kethrak warstalker." Mr. Whiskers chose that moment to reappear with his piece de resistance. A rabbit. Not Benjamin Bunny. This was clearly a wild rabbit, larger and more alert than the neighborhood pets, and Mr. Whiskers had caught it with the same effortless precision he'd used on everything else. "Oh, wow," Tommy said, impressed despite himself. "He really is showing off. He doesn't usually go for anything that big." Zek Thor set Benjamin Bunny down so suddenly that the neighborhood pet hopped away with what looked like relief. The alien's entire body was trembling, whether from fear, awe, or the complete collapse of his understanding of Earth's ecosystem, I couldn't tell. "This changes everything," he whispered. "If this is what your species considers a pet, what must your actual apex predators be like?" Tommy tilted his head thoughtfully. "Well, there's wolves and bears and stuff, but they mostly stay away from people. Mr. Whiskers is just the right size for apartment living." "Apartment living," Zek Thor repeated faintly. You keep creatures of this caliber in your dwellings, for companionship. Mr. Whiskers, apparently satisfied with his demonstration, padded back over to Tommy and began purring as he rubbed against the boy's legs. Just like that, he was a house cat again, albeit one surrounded by evidence of what could only be described as a massacre of local wildlife. He likes head scratches after hunting, Tommy said, reaching down to pet the cat. I think it helps him calm down. And watching this alien warrior, this self-proclaimed apex predator of 17 star systems, stare in absolute terror at a purring house cat while an 8-year-old explained post-hunt pet care, I realized something important. Earth wasn't a planet where apex predators had been domesticated. Earth was a planet where the apex predators had chosen to move in with us. There's a pretty significant difference between those two things, and Zekthor was just starting to figure that out. The ride back to town was what you might charitably call educational. Zekthor spent most of it staring at Mr. Whiskers with the kind of expression usually reserved for discovering that your house has been built on an ancient burial ground. The cat, for his part, had returned to his default state of weaponized napping, sprawled across Tommy's lap like he hadn't just redefined interspecies diplomacy through superior hunting techniques. I need to understand, Zekthor said finally, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose entire belief system had just been fed through a blender. Your species, you allow these creatures to cohabitate with you voluntarily? Tommy looked up from his phone, where he'd been showing Mr. Whiskers pictures of the day's hunt. Well, yeah, he's got his own bed and everything, and a litter box, and like 6 different kinds of toys. But surely you recognize the danger, Zekthor pressed. This creature is clearly capable of... He gestured helplessly at the memory of Mr. Whiskers' forest rampage. Of catching mice in our apartment, Tommy finished helpfully. Which is great, because Mom really hates mice. Captain Rodriguez, who had been taking notes throughout this entire exchange, looked up from her clipboard. If I may, she said in her best diplomatic voice, I think what our alien friend is struggling with is the concept of domestication versus partnership. Partnership? Zekthor's eye stalk swiveled toward her. Well, think about it, Rodriguez continued, warming to her theme. Mr. Whiskers could leave any time he wants. Tommy's family doesn't have him chained up or caged. He stays because he chooses to stay. But why would such a perfect killing machine choose to live with humans? Tommy scratched Mr. Whiskers behind the ears, causing the cat to purr like a small motorcycle. Because we give him food and head scratches and a warm place to sleep. Plus he gets to hunt whenever he wants, but he doesn't have to hunt just to survive. Zekthor sat in silence for a long moment, processing this information with the intensity of a computer trying to solve quantum mechanics. So your species provides resources and comfort, he said slowly, in exchange for the creature's presence and occasional pest control services. And companionship, Tommy added. Mr. Whiskers is really good at making me feel better when I'm sad. He purrs and sits on my lap, and sometimes he brings me dead mice when he thinks I need cheering up. He brings you... Tribute, Zekthor whispered. I guess. Mom calls it gross and makes me throw them away, but I think he's trying to be nice. And that's when you could practically see the light bulb go on over Zekthor's massive alien head. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he worked through the implications. Your species hasn't domesticated apex predators, he said, his voice filled with dawning horror. You've entered into voluntary mutual benefit agreements with them. That's a really fancy way to say pets, Tommy observed. No! Zekthor's voice was rising again, but this time with panic rather than arrogance. Don't you understand what this means? If creatures of this caliber choose to ally themselves with humans, what does that say about humanity's position in your planet's ecosystem? Captain Rodriguez set down her pen and fixed Zekthor with a look that was pure diplomatic steel wrapped in professional courtesy. It means, she said quietly, that maybe you should reconsider your assumptions about which species on this planet are actually at the top of the food chain. The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife, or possibly with Mr. Whiskers, who is definitely sharp enough for the job. The Kathraki Dominion, Zekthor said finally, would like to formally apologize for any misunderstandings that may have occurred during today's cultural exchange. Tommy brightened up. Does that mean you're not going to make fun of Mr. Whiskers anymore? I would not dream of insulting a creature of such obvious partnership potential, Zekthor replied carefully. Cool. He might let you pet him if you ask nicely. He likes it when people respect his hunting skills. And as we pulled back into town, watching a 7-foot alien warrior nervously ask permission to pet a house cat, while an 8-year-old explained the proper technique for earning feline approval. I couldn't help but think that this was exactly how First Contact was supposed to work. Not with grand speeches or impressive technology displays, but with the simple recognition that on a planet where apex predators choose to be pets, the real apex predators might just be the species that convinced them to move in. Mr. Whiskers purred his agreement, opened one green eye to look directly at me, and went back to sleep. After all, he'd made his point.